Are we?
Let's wait till he responds, and
Okay.
he's there definitely, yeah, somewhere.
Okay, we are alive. That's good.
Oh, hi, Milda. So nice to see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
hi. Nice to see you too.
Yeah.
I brought my students also to this.
Oh, so that was you.
So there are also some sociologists here.
Okay, so that's a good thing, right? Not only political scientists. Oh, so great to see you. Too bad I'm not in Vilnius in person.
Yeah, and it's a pity that you're not coming to Tirana to the Oritsea conference this time.
Oh, yeah, I would love to, but I feel like I feel that I don't have life anymore. I only work, so I decided to put stop on this. But this is only when I submit this, huge book.
I'm sorry, Agnieszka.
Yeah.
We are
Sorry.
streaming, so better. Let's
Oh,
start.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
yeah, so maybe let's start, and then we can leave other conversations for later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so good day to all again. And I see that there are still some people who are joining us, but introduction will take a few more minutes, so there is still some time. So I'm very, very happy to welcome you all to the second seminar of Gender Research Seminar series this year. And these seminar series are organized by Feminist Politics and Critical Theory Research Group at the Institute of International Relations and Political Science and Thinking Motherhood Research Group at the Faculty of Philology. And my name is Yeva Bolchuna. I'm a historian, and today I will be moderating the event. And I would like to shortly introduce our guest today. So Agnieszka Kościanska is a professor at the Department of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology at University of Warsaw. In 2021 and 2022, she was a visiting professor at Oxford School of Global and Area Studies. She is also the international co-investigator in the project called Gender Wars East and South. And in 2020-2023, she was a principal investigator in the project called Catholicizing Reproduction, Reproducing Catholicism, Activist Practices and Intimate Negotiations in Poland from 1930 to present, which was funded by the National Science Center in Poland. And she is an author and editor of many books and articles on gender, sexuality, and discrimination. And I was very lucky, personally, last year I have met Agnieszka in the conference on women's bodies and women's rights at Konstanz University in Germany, where she gave an excellent presentation on feminist activism within the Catholic Church in Poland, which I thought was very enlightening and quite relevant to Lithuania. So I am very, very happy that she accepted our invitation to take part in our seminars. First of all, I would like to ask everyone to be active, to ask questions, to have we have a wonderful opportunity for an academic discussion with one of the best researchers in the field. So yeah, and as always, we will have around 1 hour for the presentation, up to 1 hour, and then around half an hour for Q&A session and discussion. So I think we can start. Agnieszka, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva, for the invitation and for this kind introduction. So I will try not to take the entire hour because I think it's always more productive to discuss than to listen to one person speaking. I'm not a political scientist, but we are at the gender studies seminar at at the Faculty of Political Sciences, and I think that although I'm going to talk about religion, history, and things like this, but I think that they have they're really politicized now in Poland, and they have a huge relevance when it comes to today's politics. So I hope this will be also a little link to our host, institutional host. So yeah, so we have this. So as you can see here on this title slide, Poland is a very religious country. This is a banner which appeared at some point at my neighborhood in Warsaw, which is like a centrally located residential neighborhood, which always votes left. We are the most leftist neighborhood in the entire Warsaw. And then we had this huge banner, saying, Jesus Christ be our king, Jesus Christ, a king of Poland. So you can see that, it's kind of obvious to say that Poland is a Catholic country, but I will try to complicate this image and, looking through the lens of reproduction during socialism and post-socialism, meaning also now, I will try to problematize this image and also see some contradictions and try to understand this contradiction. Do you see my next slide? Is it moving? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So then, if you look at some statistics, so according to the last census we had in 2021, 71% of population self-identifies as Catholic, which is a huge decrease since the last census 10 years earlier, where there was 87% of population, saying that they're Catholic. But also you have to remember that over 90% of people in Poland have been baptized into the Catholic Church, and yeah, so that's so even with this latest data, with 71% people being Catholic, it's still a lot. It's still way more than half. So yeah, and then so I'm assuming that I don't know what's your knowledge on Catholicism, but given that Lithuania is a Catholic country too, so I'm assuming that people know quite a lot. But let me just say some basic things. So so Catholic rules regarding birth control are really strict. So abortion and contraception. Contraception, different than so-called natural methods, is perceived as sinful and not permitted for Catholics. And the church in Poland, the Catholic Church in Poland, has this huge influence on the state, on the Polish state, since at least since the early 1990s. With abortion, I will speak about this in a second. With abortion, being banned, and there are a lot of problems with access to even contraception. So now there's this huge debate in Poland about morning after pill. Should it be allowed without prescription? Because you can buy it, but you need a prescription, and of course, there's not so much time to find a prescription, to get a prescription. For a morning after pill, there's a short window when you can use it. So, and now there's this huge debate: cannot be sold without the prescription. So there are really like restrictions in access to contraception, and then I'm sure you so that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm sure you all remember from and I'm so sorry, I can see that there is a typo here, because I, of course, meant the year 2020, when the Polish Constitutional Tribunal make Polish abortion law even more restrictive as it was. So there were massive protest demonstrations, and then also, if you look at research on how what people do vis-a-vis birth control, so people in Poland just use all sorts of birth control methods, and actually those methods that are allowed by the church are used by just a small percentage of people, that would be just a little bit more than 10% of people, would use methods that are approved by the church. And you know, and the birth rate in Poland is very, very low, one of the lowest in Europe. So that's attests to the, you know, universal usage of contraception. So the question is how to understand these contradictions. And so you have, you know, huge Catholic population. You have, you know, the very strict rules regarding birth control, rules that are Catholics, but rules that are also, you know, in many ways supported by the state. And then on the other hand, you have, you know, people, you know, using contraception and doing abortions anyway. So and I will try to show that in a way this contradictions could be and somehow understood through the local and global, both local and global history of the Catholic Church, and you know, and how the Catholic Church understood birth control, and also what was the Polish understanding of this, and also Polish contribution to the global understanding of global Catholic understanding of birth control. So let me just start with this you know, brief overview of abortion in Poland and Catholic approaches towards abortion, and more broadly to contraception. So in Poland, Poland has this first modern abortion legislation in 1932, when abortion was legal only when it resulted from a crime or was a threat to women's health. So this is more or less what we have now. Then in the mid-50s, it was legalized and gradually made accessible on demand. So this is like a very similar to what you had in Lithuania, all over. I mean, I think it was like a similar dynamics all over the East Bloc, except from Romania, but most of the countries legalized abortion in the 50s and kept it legal through the entire communist period. And then in Poland, differently to other countries of the region, it was again criminalized in 93, and it was made permitted only in the event of women's health, or you know, or life being threatened, when fetus was deformed, or when the pregnancy you know, was a result of a crime like rape. And then in 2020, Polish Constitutional Tribunal ruled against one of those cases in which abortion could be permitted. So abortion in the case of fetal deformation is not longer legal in Poland. And of course, every time when those changes occurred, there were like huge, super heated debates related to abortion, but also they were not only about abortion, but they were like more broader around birth control, women's rights, and so it's not only so usually it's not only about abortion. And then when we look at the and of course the criminalization of abortion in the 1990s was under the pressure of the Catholic Church in Poland. And so it was also in the 30s, because there was a huge coalition in the 1930s to legalize abortion completely back then. But then it was the pressure of the church to do it, you know, only in those small instances, and the same happened in the 1993. So, and then when you look at the history of Catholic approaches towards abortion and contraception in the 20th century, and I think it's also important to remember that that this is only in the 20th century when the church took this really strong stance on abortion, and it wasn't as rigid earlier on. So the encyclical Casti Connubii from 1930, ban abortion completely, saying for Catholics, saying that this is a murder, and it also didn't see much space for any other forms of birth control. Only some special, under some special, very harsh circumstances, women could. Catholic couples, Catholic married couples could maybe have what was called an honest abstinence, so could abstain from having sex in certain moments, and this kind of thinking was made even stronger in the encyclical Humane Vitae by Paul VI in 1968. Which also said that abortion is a sin, and contraception is family planning is only possible when through so-called natural means. So you can have rhythm method or the calendar method, and just not to have sex during some days of your menstrual cycle. So that was the only solution, and this and that was really surprising, because it went really much against what was going on within the Catholic Church in the 60s, where during the Second Vatican Council and through the work of the Special Commission for birth control and population, which was organized by John the 23rd, who the Pope before Paul VI, and the Commission really tried to find a solution how to combine Catholicism and birth control. So there were a lot of discussions, and also the Second Vatican Council said that this issues should be decided in Catholic conscience, not through some regulations. But then John the 23rd died, and Paul VI, under the influence of a lot of historians, would argue Cardinal Karol Wojtyła, who later became John Paul II, the Polish Pope, that he was very much a huge influence on the encyclical. And then when John Paul II became the Pope, he was he had this really strong position on birth control. He was just totally against abortion and totally against any means of birth control that would be different, that would be except from the so-called natural ones. So I'm just saying they are not really natural because they are based on science, but this is a term used by Catholics and promoted by them. So there's always a quotation mark. Okay, so that was how these things were developing. And then when it comes to discussions on in Poland, so in the 1960s, Poland is a communist country, but the Polish Catholic Church is quite strong, and there's a lot of going on. There's Catholic media, and there are, it was only in the 50s when the church was really, persecuted by the communist government. But then later on, after 56, there's a lot of Catholic initiatives are visible, and people try to go to church, and also there's a lot of debates within Catholic communities. So and also there's a lot, if you go through Catholic press of this time, there's so much on birth control, and so much on family planning, thinking about how do you see how to combine Catholicism with needs of modern life, when there is impossible to have so many children. And there are a lot of so for instance, there is a special issue of Wieś, the Bond, one of the major Catholic magazines still exists, which was published in 62, and that was the issue was organized by Andrzej Wielawiejski, who was one of Wieś editors, and the editor-in-chief of this was Tadeusz Mazowiecki, who was later the first Polish prime minister after communism. So this is like a really prominent circle. And so there's this whole special issue on Catholic sexual life. So there are a lot of translations from international Catholic debates, and there are some reports on how these things are being discussed in other Catholic contexts, and there are some local authors. So there's Wielawiejski saying, well, there's this huge population crisis coming, and if we don't, if this is really interesting because there were a lot of voices that already in the 1960s that if the humanity will not do something about themselves, there will be climate crisis and political crisis, overpopulation, and all these things we are witnessing now. They were already foreseen back in the 60s. So so there was that was his idea. So he initiated this issue, saying that when he was young, nobody talked to him about sexuality, and now he can see that this is such an important issue, and we should discuss it also as Catholics. And then there was a super interesting article by Anna Morawska, who is another Catholic intellectual, the one I was Eva saw me speaking at this history conference a few months ago, who was also a Polish correspondent for one of Catholic newspapers for the Second Vatican Council, and she was but she was like a very important Catholic activist, and her contribution to this special issue was that, well, this is just a social need. We have to think about how to how to combine Catholicism with some practicing birth control. And she was like following all those debates that were going on in other Catholic countries, and was pushing for like new understanding of birth control in marriage, and saying that in modern times we just have to do it. And then, but this is really interesting how in this this Catholic magazine invited Mikołaj Kozarkiewicz, who was a sex educator and the president of Polish Planned Parenthood, and he was saying that that when Catholics come to see him about sexual advice, they always see sexuality and religion as something totally separated, that they do not connect this issues. So, and then there was also an article by Wanda Płotawska, who was a good friend of John Paul II, and she later on she became really conservative thinker, and was really and a lot of historians of the Catholic Church argue that she was the one who convinced John Paul II to become so strict when it comes to abortion and contraception. So, but in this special issue, she's just saying how these things are complicated, and so you can see that there's a vivid discussion leaning towards the idea that really the church has to find a space to open up for this new contraceptive technologies, that they are necessary, that that faith should be some kind of in some way reformed. And then the encyclical Humane Vitae came in 68, but still the debate in Poland was going on. It was so Andrzej Wielawiejski, the editor of Wieś, published this book Marriage Upon Us in 1972. And the title of my presentation is a quote from him from this book, when he was saying some arguments used against contraceptions do not always correspond to reality. And he was arguing that, and this book, you know, if you talk to Catholic couples who were growing up during this period, they would say this was like you know, the major Catholic sex manual. The book is quite amazing. He has all those prescription how to have good sex in marriage. So, for instance, he's saying, well, it shouldn't be it should you should take your time. And he said, well, I don't think that people should use too many marriage manuals, technical marriage manuals. Well, maybe they should follow Kama Sutra, yes, but some more basic marriage manuals are not so great. So yeah, and then he was, and in the first edition of the book in 72, he was also saying he has this whole very long critical passage on the Humane Vitae, saying, well, that this is unrealistic, it doesn't make any sense, that people will not follow this, and that this should be dropped. And he argued that there are worse things, as you can see on this quote here: failure to control lust of power, anger, and the desire for consumption, and so on, are sometimes much more of a threat to spirituality. And yet, generally, when it comes to guiding Catholics' consciences, they are not yet to be condemned as severely as condemns suppositories and the pill. So he's saying that there are worse things than contraception, and this like alcohol and like the you know, violence and stuff like this, which are not condemned by the church. And this only, you know, sex and, you know, birth control are condemned. So, and then when the book was published in 1972, that was a huge scandal within the Polish Catholic Church. And Karol Wojtyła, future John Paul II, who is a powerful figure at the church in the 70s in the Polish church in the 70s, he just really was criticizing everybody who said anything against the Humane Vitae encyclical. And also, he was super critical towards Wielawiński, who was, you know, the editor of this major Catholic magazine. So there was a big conflict, and Wielawiński tried in many ways to, you know, to talk to Wojtyła, to convince him, but it wasn't possible, and his voices were not heard. And in his memoirs, he's saying that was Wanda Pułtawska, you know, this Catholic conservative doctor and thinker, who just didn't allow Wojtyła to talk to him and to hear his ideas. And so, and then this, I think this is really important, that that those strong voices, strong ideas heard, you know, developed by Wojtyła, John Paul II, and his friend Wanda Pułtawska, were really developing during this time, and they were arguing that abortion is like the Holocaust, and this is something, and abortion is a threat to the Polish nation, and they were, you know, presenting these ideas all over, like globally, and they became really we can see now that this kind of ideas are in many circles mainstream anti-abortion ideas, and they're going way beyond the Catholic Church, because they are, you know, this whole idea of the culture of death. These are issues that are developing not only in Catholic circles, but also, I don't know, in US evangelicals and so on. And then there was also still during communism in the 70s and 80s, when also, you know, on the one hand, there were some so-called pro-life ideas developing in Poland, but there were a lot of things were coming to Poland from, for instance, from the US, when there was already strong anti-abortion activism. So, for instance, you have this so they received this whole package of babies that were born, what's the term? Babies that were born before, they due date, how they survive, but they could be aborted, because so there was this whole of tiny little babies, whole package of those pictures, and then later in the 1990s, they started this journal Miłujcie się, Love One Another, when they were, publishing a lot of pro-life issues from abroad, mostly from the US, and not necessarily from Catholic circles. So here we have this article of about a mother who's meeting a mother and her daughter who was conceived as a result of rape, but she didn't have an abortion like all the Polish women would do, and how happy they are. So there is a lot of transnational connections, and those pro-life connections. But on the other hand, there are still in Polish Catholic circles, there are still some pro-choice tendencies. And Wielowiejski, the Więź editor, already in the mid 1990s, he proposed like a liberalization of 1993 anti-abortion law, but he didn't succeed. But there are all those internal Catholic ideas, pro-choice ideas, and Wielowiejski himself was talking that this is a quote from his memoirs, saying that Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II, was a fundamentalist who just couldn't understand why people don't want to follow those rules, and he blamed this fundamentalist for all the problems the church has, and all the that people are going away from the church because of this pro-life fundamentalism. So this is the history, and and then you can see that the Polish history, church history of abortion, and universal Catholic history of approach towards abortion and contraception, they are really interlinked, and they are very much related to John Paul II and his fundamentalism, to use this Wielowiejski term, and his destroying opposition towards this radical pro-life anti-abortion ideas. So let me then just give you some examples from my own research, how these issues were perceived by Catholics. So you can see this discussion that is going on in the 1960s, but then from the 70s onwards, the discussion is being stopped, silenced by Wojtyła, and the church gradually becomes more and more anti-abortion, and finally succeeded, make it happen. Abortion is illegal in the 1990s after communism. So what I'm going to show in this next part of the presentation comes from the project mentioned in the introduction, Catholicizing Reproduction, Reproducing Catholicism. We did 100 interviews with Polish Catholic, mostly women, but also some men, who represent various groups, both people, groups in terms of progressive versus conservative. I know that these terms are not perfect, but those two different groups, but also coming from various social and geographical backgrounds. So you have people from big cities, well-educated, middle class, but we also talk to people from smaller towns, and also with various education backgrounds. So and of course different age groups, and they were like really long, in-depth interviews related to their views and experiences, and all these people were self-identified as really very much religious. For them, we focus on those people who would declare that religion is an important part of their life. And so then I would like to give you an example how they perceived all those discussions, and how legal meaning in the state, but also legal in terms what's legal for Catholics within church rules. So how they reacted to this, what did they do about this? So let's start with some examples from the past. These are from like oral history interviews, related to what was going on in the past under socialism, when abortion was legal, and the church was against this. But yeah, so for instance, there is a so we saw in our interviews that people really try to go around this prohibition of birth control for Catholics. And they use it extensively. A lot of people, I mean, everybody was using some kind of illegal for Catholics, sinful contraception methods. So, for instance, Monica, who was born in 1956, and she described her as religious but not bigot. And then she was saying that, and I think that's a really important trope in those research, that people would meet a wise priest. So they would go to confession, they would confess of using birth control, and sometimes even abortion. But they would, there would be some kind of networking with other women, which priest to avoid, and to whom go and confess. So there are a lot of examples of people, women saying, well, I have this friend who, went to this priest in this parish, and he didn't give her absolution, and then so they wouldn't go to him. They would look for a wise priest. So there was this. So a lot of stories in our interviews about wise priests. But then there were also other issues going on, other forms of accepting birth control, because it was widely accessible. And so, for instance, Kasia, born in 63, she would just kind of try to look at her own, how to that this is in opposition to the Catholic doctrine. But if you look, you can always find some Catholic thinkers who would approve in a way. And this is really interesting, that people were looking for those answers on their own, because this is much different than research about Catholicism and contraception in other parts of Europe. Because in Poland, after the Humane Vitae, after the encyclical Humane Vitae, all the discussions were stopped, and there was no constant Catholic protest against this. But it was only communists who make fun of the Catholic Church, that it's backwarded. But there was no criticism of Humane Vitae from Catholics. So, and then that's different to what was going on in Western Europe, where a lot of that the Humane Vitae encyclical was protested by many Catholic organizations and local churches, and there was vivid opposition towards this. So if people wanted to, on the individual level, reaffirm birth control, they could do it through using discourses, using arguments they could hear in their local churches. They could, they were around, but they were not around in Poland. So here we have a lot of interview partners who talk about their own experience for looking for some kind of Catholic solution to this. And interestingly, because you could suspect this among those who are most educated and, you know, belonging to urban Catholic intelligentsia, you know, reading the Bond, Vieille, and so on. But it wasn't only in the circles. You could have people who are not so well educated and who would still try to, you know, figure out some kind of Catholic solution to this. And the third way of dealing this was just to you know, exclude birth control from the religious realm. So this is like it's an interview with a man from born in 61. He's saying back then in state socialist time, religion was separate and sexuality was separate. I separated knowledge from faith. And then he's saying that this is only in the 1980s when he realized that this issue connect, and he heard about them in a church, but that it's a sin. But you know, but he's, you know, but this division was just very strict for him. And then and this is also with other people we talk, our other interview partners, especially women, who would say, well, this is my own business. There's nothing a priest could do about it. I don't care what they say. This is just not religious issue. And this is exactly what was also confirmed by the sex educator quoted earlier on, how, you know, people who come to see him who are Catholic, they don't care about the church. So this is so either through a wise priest or through, you know, trying to build some kind of theological explanation, or just excluding this from the realm of religion. There were the three major strategies to dealing with this ban. And just I promise not to take an entire hour, so let me just jump to today. So as I said earlier, in 2020, the Polish Constitutional Tribunal ruled that you know, make Polish restrictive anti-abortion law even more restrictive by banning the possibility of having abortion in the instance of, you know, fetus deformation. And there were massive protests all around Poland. I'm sure you saw them on the international media. And during this, so when we were doing our research, that was exactly then during this time of protest, and we interviewed a lot of Catholic women who supported the protests or even took part in them, and this is really interesting how they thought about them. So this is a young woman, you know, 26-year old, and she's a speech therapist from Warsaw. And she's saying, if somebody proposed a legal regulation that you can't have sex if you are not married, I would also be against that, because somehow it isn't right for my religion to impose a way of functioning for the whole country. And then if you look at what she's saying later on, is that, you know, she basically thinks abortion is not okay. It's a sin. And she has a problem. Is it okay to have it legalized completely or not? But she's against it, but not so fully, because she's saying on request until the 12th week, which is, as far as I understand, what the women's strike, you know, the demonstrations organizer suggests at the moment. I don't think I would support this. I mean, yes, I'm against it, but I'm kind of try not to judge people who have had an abortion, because the truth is that whatever decision is taken, it's the mother who has to live with it. So so she's kind of against, but she thinks it's a woman's decision. And if you read further on, she doesn't judge. So she's saying, so generally, when it comes to the current situation, I do not agree with all the demands by the women's strike, because, as I said, abortion on request until the 12th week, this doesn't really speak to me. But I disagree even more with the decision by the Constitutional Tribunal. So there is again this idea of trying to find some kind of solution, some kind of way behind this, maybe separate religion and the state, like here. And then she continues about this ruling, which makes women who are pregnant, they know that the child will not be healthy. That this is and then she's talking that this ruling is just really not good, because people should decide themselves if they want to have a sick child, that you cannot force anybody to this. And yeah, so that, and sometimes when there are all those health issues and so on, there shouldn't be any restrictions on abortion. And then there is another person we talked to. She's Marzena. She's a university professor from Krakow, which is the most conservative Polish town. She's a Catholic activist, almost 70-year-old. And then she was recalling how it was, how abortion was perceived under socialism, and she was saying, just like that, naturally, as in I went to the hairdressers. So she's saying how how easy it was to have an abortion and how unstigmatized it was. And then and this is and then she continues how how difficult it is for women to have to be pregnant when they know the child will not be healthy, and that this should be decided by the judge. And she's really angry with the Constitutional Tribunal, saying that that they destroyed this what was called compromise, and it's a crime because the outcome will be that abortions will be legalized on demand. She was expecting this, and I think this is really interesting how she and I think this is very common also among Catholics, is saying, well, we don't like the abortions, but we think abortion is sinful and there should be no abortion, but not for a ban, but through some other means. So for instance, a state should, this is a quote, a state should create such conditions that first, women want to have children, second, that if they do not want them, they can give them away, give them to somebody else, so they can be provided for. And that the church and then she knows that the church is against contraception, but she thinks that that contraception is the best way to avoid abortions. So again, this is kind of in a light what Andrzej Wielawieski was writing in the 60s and 70s later on, that that there are other ways of preventing, and also in his legal bill from the 90s, that there are some there's some other ways of preventing abortion than a ban, and that this is women's decision, and all these ideas how to circulate around it. Okay, so to conclude, so if we look at religion and birth control in Poland, we can see how much this is embedded in the history of Catholic approaches to reproduction, both local and global. How it really influenced how what are people's options, and then we can see very strongly also that practices are more liberal than Catholic rules, and also more liberal that allowed by the Polish law today. And I think this is also something I would like to stress very strongly, that part of this is this long is a history of socialism, where communism in Poland, where there was certain legal liberalism when it comes to reproductive rights. Abortion was legal, contraception was not, was also legal and accessible, and that some kind of counterbalanced the Catholic influence and gave Catholic men and women certain agency in the realm of reproduction. And so, and I think that the church has a political power. They managed to have abortion banned and contraception restricted in many ways, but they do not have spiritual power over Polish people, who just in the realm of reproduction do whatever they feel like, and they look for other things, not for faith. And I think that this is I would like to end with a quote from Wielawieski on the encyclical Humane Vitae, from his book Marriage Upon Us, from this book from the 1970s, when he was criticizing the church position, saying that people will leave the church and people will not be true Catholics, will only be some kind of ritual Catholics, they will not follow the rules, that the church will lose on this. So he was saying about the Humane Vitae, for it causes people of honesty and good conscience to suffer inordinately, yet very often probably fails to produce the desired outcome, because some people, having abandoned the church position, often leave the church for this reason, while others who do actually apply periodic abstinence are doing this not through deep understanding and conviction, only then this method makes full sense, but through obedience, which has its moral worth, but must also bring about negative consequences, taking the form of neuroses and inhibitions, and for the church, the negative consequences that just people are not good Catholics anymore. Okay, so thank you. I think that's all, and these are like publications from our project, if anyone is interested, in our website.
Yep.
Thank you so much
Yeah,
for listening.
thank you very much, Agnieszka. It was perfect. Thank you. So first of all, I will use my privilege as a moderator to ask one question which is particularly interesting to me, and then I will pass the opportunity for others. So I was thinking, when you were talking about the John Paul II stance on this, and well, of course, the situation in the Soviet Union bloc countries was quite different from the socialist Poland in many ways.
Yes.
So it's not there are, of course, a lot of similarities, but also quite a lot of differences, which are very important. But I was just thinking, that is it possible that that this conservative path that has been chosen by John Paul II was kind of a reaction to what was happening on this issue in the communist and also in the socialist bloc, that general demoralization of the society, high crime rates, proliferation of abortions, the devaluation of human life in general, the instrumentalization of human beings, and so on and so forth. And that was simply an attempt to kind of regain moral, well, maybe not to regain, but to keep the moral authority. And it was just purely political, maybe. I don't know. That's just a question, but because I don't know. But I was just thinking that maybe that makes sense to me, at least when I'm thinking why he chose to have this, to keep this conservative path.
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways you're right, but I think it's even more complicated. So him and Wanda Poltawska, they will, you know, talk a lot about this. There's correspondence between them, and there's communism, but there's also, you know, the past World War II and a lot of suffering related to this. So she was the concentration camp, and she was really preoccupied with idea of human dignity and human life. And then, of course, communism was also perceived as a kind of, as you said, you know, instrumentalizing human life and so on. So in a way, I think they tried to imagine some kind of humanistic position. And if you if you think about Polish history in the 70s, when, and the 60s and the 70s, when Wojtyła was still in Poland, and he was like super popular, so he would travel all over. He gave a lot of talks. He was like a really very popular you know, philosopher, talking about ethics. He was talking a lot about sexuality too, you know, stressing issues like dignity and how much and then if you also and that was also something that at least in Poland you could see in communist press and communist worldview, that, you know, there are all those terrible things going on. So that was in many directions, because then if you look Polish official press from the late 60s and 70s, there are a lot of criticism on, you know, sexual revolution as being, you know, so there's too much sex. We as a proper socialist society would not allow this, you know, instrumentalization on human body through sexuality. And then the Catholic Church would say like a similar things. But of course, when it comes to abortion and women's rights, then the communists would be very strict. Well, we are for women's rights and abortion, because abortion is something, you know, it's a huge achievement of socialist state and, you know, socialist people. So we will not allow the church to interfere with this. So I think there are many levels. So in some levels, the church and the state would speak the same language, but not on abortion in many ways. So I think it's a complicated idea, but of course, but I think Wojtyła was speaking against communism, saying that I'm a real humanist, and those guys here, communists, are, you know, against humanity, against human dignity, and abortion is part of this. So yes, so this is one, and the other thing is, you know, is connecting abortion to the Holocaust, and you know, saying that, you know, this is like Holocaust. If, you know, if a mother can kill her own child, then you have concentration camps. So I think this is like a complex situation, but it starts here in Poland and goes, you know, widely into the entire Catholic Church. I mean, it doesn't start only in Poland. There are also other sources, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I can see that we have one hand raised already. So Milda, please.
Thank you, Agnieszka. That was very interesting and insightful. I wanted to ask you about this construction of life culture versus death culture. How much is this construction provided by writings of John Paul II is referred to in the legislation of in Polish legislation against abortion, and then have this construction been referred to in the interviews that you conducted?
Yeah, thank you. So in the legislation, no. But in the discourse around this, yes, very much. So I mean, you know, so there's this idea, you know, of protecting life from its conception. And of course, there are people who would like to see this protecting life from conception, you know, a major principle of, you know, culture of life, you know, into the Polish constitution, but it's not there. So legally not, but then And then it's also interesting about so if you, for instance, the debate, there was a huge abortion debate in the Polish parliament just like last week, and all right-wing politicians would speak about the culture of life, and protecting life, and entire anti-abortion movement, it's about protecting life. So this is huge. But when it comes to interviews, this is really interesting, because it mostly appear in those with interviews with those who could be seen as more conservative. And only I had this experience, which I think is a good example of how politicized these issues are. So I did an interview I conducted an interview with a woman who was involved in in a small Polish town in northern Poland, east north Poland, yes, so close to Lithuanian border. She was involved in a local pro-life organization. She was telling me everything about protecting life. She told me about this film they watched during one of the meetings about our abortion survivors. So somebody who survived abortion was the mother tried to kill him, and he survived, right? So there's this whole language of culture of death and life. But then we have this conversation, because of course this is impossible for me to hide what I think about this, because everybody can Google me and see what I wrote and what kind of views I have. That I definitely support legal abortion. But still, this and other women just were fine with talking to me, and they asked me what I think. And then we and she asked me what I think, and I think that, well, I think that there are various situations, and perhaps the law should be relaxed. So then through this conversation, when the conversation comes from the level of declaration, culture of life, abortion feminists who want to kill babies and so on, to like a more human level, then it's gone. It's like, well, yes, I really think that abortion is really bad. It's a terrible sin. It's we should protect life, but but that's such a different situation. I can imagine I would never judge another woman. So I can see that this language is just so much into, I think it's a part of a problem. And that's why I think that, because now there's this idea to have a referendum on abortion in Poland, which perhaps might be won by a pro-choice side, but it will bring terrible damage to the public debate, because it's so polarized and so brutal now. But still, there's some possibility to talk to another person on a human level. And then if there's a referendum and the temperature will grow, I think this will be not possible anymore. So yeah, so I think this is really interesting how this is on the political level, but not necessarily on more everyday conversation or human level conversation, if you can call it, the situation in interview situation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have more questions? Davila, can you check if we have questions on Facebook, please? Okay, we don't have any.
But we have a question here, I think.
Yes, sorry,
Christina.
I don't see how to raise my hand now, so I'm just
No,
doing
but
it.
we can see your hand. Like this.
Right. So it's actually a very similar question, on the relation between sort of life and death, the dynamic and the discourses. I'm very interested because in the US, for instance, I was reading that it was much more, politically established that abortion is killing a baby, that it is a death, much more politically established than it was in any, coming from any religious teaching by itself. Like it was a political movement. Well, at least it was argued so, that that created this sort of like anti-abortion movement, you know, the pro-life movement, that created this sort of massive idea relation between abortion and the death and the killing of a baby by various means. So yeah, I'm just curious, you know, what is the relation between like and later on the author argues that it has become like an essential part, like that being pro-life is like essential part, you know, of like sort of being a Catholic. So I'm just curious, you know, a little bit more on this relation of how it is being made and how it is actually, you know, being taught, written in the Catholic teaching.
But can you repeat the very beginning? Where was it?
It's a book about the U.S. context.
About the US. Okay, sorry, because
Yes,
I haven't
yes.
heard if this is the US or something else. It was just some kind of disruption of connection. Okay, yeah. So I think this is also very interesting, I guess, how to see transnational flows of those ideas and I mean, and I think in the US, from what I know, with these ideas were also Catholic, yes, and yeah, so they were also Catholic, but then they were also forged into like a more political context, and you know, evangelicals were convinced that, you know, being pro-life is important, although they didn't care about this earlier on. And then you have Donald Trump, who was a huge supporter of American Planned Parenthood until he decided to run for president for the first time, but then became anti-abortion. So so yeah, so it was like in the US, of course, it was like political. Oh, it was political and not only connected to the Catholic Church. And I think and I think that there's a lot of as a part of our project, we also look at those connections, global connections, and we continue to I have this project Gender Wars, and we will have a seminar in May on abortion legislations in Europe and Latin America. So it's really interesting how to see that, how to observe that this kind of you know, anti-abortion coalitions were built already in the 1970s, and they were not only Catholics. I mean, there were Catholics were very important in them, but there were also other Christian denominations, but also a lot of they were often connected to, for instance, some conservative circles. So, for instance, they had this conference in the 1970s in Colombia, which was funded by you know, Colombian businessmen who, you know, and also some Polish pro-lifers traveled there, and there were a lot of people from the US. And then there's work by Kevin Moss, who writes on the World Congress of Families, which is a collaboration of American evangelicals and Russian, you know, sociologists of religion, and the Russian Orthodox Church, starting in the night. I mean, starting earlier, but made official in the 1990s. So these things are, I guess, travel, and they're in many ways Catholic, and so is the like attack on gender ideology, because it's a part of this. But I think that they are connected also to other discourses and other groups, and those coalitions are not necessarily Catholic only. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, and there was a question in the chat, I think.
Yes, I will just read it out loud. So Agla Kachkuta is asking, can you tell us more about the birth control practices used by the Catholics you interviewed?
Yeah, so thank you so much for for this question, which is like for research, which is really nice. So a lot of people try to use those methods that are allowed by the church, but just failed. It became too complicated, and they just decided they will just use whatever. And there's, you know, all sorts of birth control methods are being used by Polish Catholics. And then they trying to figure out what to do with them, whether talk to a wise priest or maybe but many of them went through what was seen in those quotes from interviews, went through those you know, complicated conceptualizations in their conscience or mind or whatever, trying to figure out, can I do it? Is this okay to do it? So, and all of them at the end decided that this is okay. But of course, there is this group that relies on those methods that are allowed by the church. And this is really interesting. Also, how they're presented and how they are being seen as kind of equality oriented methods. So the idea is that within, you know, the bad contraception is the one that puts all the responsibility on women, while, you know, Catholic family planning is for both, and that men are involved in this, and they should participate in like measuring women's body symptoms to figure out which days are fertile and which are not, and how also to, you know, make also to, you know, have those days when you cannot have sex. So that's good for couples, that's good for men, that they can exercise self-control and so on. So this is also interesting. It's not, this is all really a minority, but there are people who actually follow the rules. And but as I said in the very beginning, there are like around maybe 10% of the population, but still, I think this is really interesting that this could be seen as something empowering, in a way, natural and you know, and equality oriented. But of course, there are a lot of people who'd say, well, we were trying to do this, but after the third child, we didn't plan. We decided that we should try something else, and then all the process of rationalization and you know, combining this with Catholicism happened, or just people just decide, you know, leaving the church. That also happens. I hope that answers the question.
Yep, thank you. If we don't have any questions from the audience, I have maybe I will just ask the last one.
Okay. Thank you.
Which is also maybe more interesting to me than but we'll see. So I was just thinking how these how the teachings of Catholic Church, how it can be seen in the broader context of the Christian family. You know, how's this? What similarities? What differences? Maybe there are, you know, more nuanced picture than just everybody are just pro-life and that's it. You know, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the Catholic Church is the only one who's so focused on sexuality and who's so against contraception and abortion. I mean, abortion is more complicated, but contraception, I think that's and the question about the US, you know, that was under Catholic influence that some Protestant churches started to get interested into this, and the reason, you know, for the Encyclicam Casti Connubii from 1930 was that some Protestant churches were, you know, becoming more pro-choice, and we would call it, they didn't use the term back then. So that was a reaction to Protestant churches, and especially the Anglican Church, for the, you know, relaxed position on birth control. So I think that this is a diverse approach, and but I think that the Catholic Church is the most restrictive here, and no other church has this idea. But as we can see, even in Poland, this is something that I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, it works politically very well because we can see it not only in Poland but also in the US, where we have this massive backlash when it comes to women's reproductive rights. But that's political level, but practical level, and then even how people think when they go away from those well-learned slogans about protecting life, then it's another story. Yes.
Thank you. So once again, do we have more questions? If not, then thank you very much. Oh, Milda, do you have one or not?
I had one kind of comment because my students are coming from human rights course, so I was wondering how much this fight against abortion in this Catholic discourse has the human rights language. I mean that this is, the violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and etc.
Do you mean pro-life or pro-choice?
Pro-life, pro-life.
Yes. Yeah, so anti-abortion discourse often also uses human rights language, saying that abortion is not a human right, but that they are the ones who protect human rights from conception. So the idea about human rights here, I mean, here human rights are very much used because they're also used by pro-choice, obviously, saying that abortion is a human right, and even in the parliamentary debate in last week in Warsaw, human rights appeared in many ways, saying that showing how, I mean, there was this argument going this and forth, then that the left would say, well, abortion is a human right, and then the right would say, no, abortion is a violation of human rights because the life of the fetus. And then of course there are all those issues, and especially in the context of the 2020 Constitutional Tribunal ruling, the idea of rights of people with disabilities. So the major activist, pro-life activist, when it comes to this, is Kaja Godek, who herself is a person with a disability, and she is, she fights for disability rights that are also related to human rights. So, and also disability, women to have children, and so on. So yeah, so human rights, and then maybe I can advertise because we have this project, Gender Wars, and we are going to have a seminar on the topic of abortion and human rights with Marta Buchholz, who just got not just, but last year got a ERC consolidated grant looking at abortion and human rights. So we will talk about her project that will be on May 14th. So please come on Zoom as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Agnieszka. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So I'm checking once more. Do we have more questions? If not, thank you very much, Agnieszka. It was a pleasure to have you with us. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the invitation and all the questions and comments. It was great to be here.
Yep, thank you. So and thanks for the audience. I hope to see everyone in our next seminar. Yep, so goodbye.